The air before battle has a distinct weight to it, as if history itself is holding its breath. Across the field stands what looks less like an army and more like a machine, rank upon rank of men locked together, shields tight, 18-foot sarissas angled forward in perfect alignment. From a distance, it resembles a moving wall of steel, bristling and alive. This was the Macedonian Phalanx, the instrument that carried Alexander the Great from the hills of Greece to the deserts of Persia. For more than a century, it had been synonymous with inevitability. Kingdoms did not defeat it, they were flattened by it. Generals did not outmaneuver it, they were swallowed whole. The Phalanx was not simply a formation. It was a doctrine of dominance, a belief that unity and discipline, enforced without exception, could overpower anything in its path. And yet, on a summer afternoon in 168 BC, that legend advanced towards something entirely different. Waiting on uneven ground were Roman legions, citizen soldiers shaped not by inherited glory but by hard lessons, repeated defeats, and relentless adaptation. They were not a single, rigid block. They were modular, flexible, empowered to think and act within the chaos of combat. What unfolded that day was more than a clash of armies. It was a collision between two philosophies of power: perfection versus adaptability, centralized control versus distributed initiative. By sunset, one of the most feared military systems in history would lie shattered. The question is not whether Rome won. The question is far more unsettling. How did Rome make Alexander's warriors obsolete? Before it became the engine of conquest that reshaped the ancient world, Macedonia was an afterthought. To the polished city-states of southern Greece, Athens with its philosophers and Sparta with its austere warriors, Macedonia was a rough northern kingdom, tribal, unstable, and politically fragile. Its nobles feuded, its borders were porous, and its army was little more than a loose collection of fighters bound by loyalty to local chiefs. No one looked north and saw the future. If anything, they saw a buffer zone, a place to exploit or ignore. That changed with one man, Philip II. Philip did not inherit strength. He inherited crisis. When he took the throne in 359 BC, Macedonia was on the verge of collapse. Enemies pressed in from every direction. The treasury was strained. Rivals within the kingdom questioned his legitimacy. Many rulers in his position would have focused on diplomacy or short-term survival. Philip chose something far more ambitious. He decided to redesign the very foundation of Macedonian power, its army. As a young hostage in Thebes, Philip had observed the best military minds in Greece at work. He studied their tactics, their formations, and their assumptions. He understood the dominance of the traditional Greek hoplite phalanx, citizen soldiers fighting shoulder to shoulder with round shields and 8-foot spears. But he also recognized its limits. The hoplite system relied on seasonal campaigns and civic participation. It was powerful but rigid. Philip saw an opportunity not to copy it, but to outgrow it. His most radical decision began with a simple piece of equipment: the spear. The traditional dory, used by Greek hoplites, was already formidable. Philip extended it dramatically, creating the sarissa, a pike that stretched roughly 18 feet long. It was an audacious innovation. The sarissa required 2 hands to wield, which meant soldiers had to carry smaller shields strapped to their forearms. It demanded constant drilling, coordination, and physical endurance. This was not a weapon for part-time militia. It required professionals. So Philip professionalized his army. He trained his men year-round. He standardized equipment. He instituted rigorous discipline and relentless marching. Soldiers were expected to carry their own gear, move quickly, and maintain formation under stress. Over time, this force evolved into something unprecedented: the Macedonian Phalanx. 16 ranks deep, the formation presented a forest of spear points to the enemy. The first 5 rows angled their sarissas forward, creating overlapping layers of steel. An opposing soldier would face multiple spear tips before ever reaching the first Macedonian shield. The rear ranks added momentum and pressure, turning the formation into a living battering ram. It was not designed for individual heroics. In fact, it made individual heroism irrelevant. Each man was a component in a larger system, and the power of that system lay in its cohesion. On flat ground, with discipline intact, the Macedonian phalanx was nearly unstoppable. Its first great demonstration came at the Battle of Kyrenia in 338 BC. There, Philip faced a coalition of Greek city-states, including Athens and Thebes, armies with centuries of battlefield experience. The Greek hoplites expected a contest between equals. Instead, they encountered a machine. The longer reach of the Sarissa kept them at bay. The depth of the formation absorbed their pressure. And when gaps appeared, Philip coordinated his forces with precision, exploiting weaknesses and driving the advantage home. Kyrenia was more than a victory. It was proof of concept. In a single afternoon, Philip broke the military independence of the major Greek states and established Macedonian dominance over Greece. The backward kingdom of the north had become the hegemon of the Hellenic world. But Philip's revolution did not end with him. When he was assassinated in 336 BC, his 20-year-old son inherited not just a throne, but a fully operational war machine. Alexander III, known to history as Alexander the Great, would take that machine farther than anyone imagined possible. Alexander did not fundamentally alter the phalanx. He perfected its integration with other arms. The phalanx fixed the enemy in place, pinning them under relentless forward pressure. Meanwhile, Alexander's companion cavalry struck at decisive points, shattering enemy leadership and collapsing resistance. It was a coordinated system, infantry as the anvil, cavalry as the hammer. From the Granicus River to Issus, from Gaugamela to the gates of India, this combination proved devastating. The Persian Empire, with its vast resources and immense armies, fell before it. City after city capitulated. Kings were defeated, captured, or killed. The phalanx marched across Asia Minor, through Syria and Egypt, into Mesopotamia and beyond. It crossed rivers, deserts, and mountains. It became synonymous with inevitability. For the soldiers within it, the formation was both shield and identity. They were not fighting as isolated warriors seeking personal glory. They were part of an unstoppable structure. The phalanx did not depend on improvisation, it depended on alignment. As long as its ranks held and the ground beneath it remained favorable, it functioned with mechanical efficiency. Over time, this success hardened into belief. The phalanx was not merely effective, it was invincible. It had defeated the best of Greece. It had broken Persia. It had followed Alexander to the edge of the known world. Generations grew up seeing it as the ultimate expression of military power. To question it was to question the legacy of Philip and Alexander themselves. Even after Alexander's death and the fragmentation of his empire, the successor kingdoms clung to this model. They maintained the long pikes, the dense formations, the emphasis on cohesion and frontal dominance. The phalanx was more than a tactic. It was tradition, prestige, and proof of superiority. And for decades, it continued to win. But embedded within its perfection was an assumption that the battlefield would cooperate, that the ground would be level, that the formation would remain intact, that control would flow from the top down without disruption. It was a system optimized for ideal conditions, and when those conditions were met, it delivered overwhelming results. By the mid-2nd century BC, as Rome expanded west and then east, the Macedonian phalanx still carried the aura of Alexander. It was the inheritance of conquerors, the symbol of a golden age. On paper, it remained terrifying. A wall of steel, 18-foot spears projecting outward, advancing with unified momentum. To an observer, it looked eternal. And that is what makes what happened later so striking. Before it could be rendered obsolete, it had to be understood as dominant. Before it could fall, it had to stand at the pinnacle of military design. The Macedonian phalanx was not a flawed experiment. It was, for its time, a masterpiece. It unified Greece, toppled empires, and defined an era. It turned a forgotten kingdom into a superpower and handed a young king the tools to redraw the map of the world. To face it was to confront history itself, which is precisely why its eventual defeat would send shockwaves far beyond a single battlefield. If Macedonia was forged in ambition, Rome was forged in adversity. Long before it stood toe-to-toe with the heirs of Alexander, Rome was a regional power fighting for survival on the Italian peninsula. It did not rise on the back of a single visionary king or a revolutionary invention. It rose through failure, painful, public, and often humiliating failure. Roman armies were ambushed in mountain passes by the Samnites, crushed by Gallic war bands, and nearly annihilated by Pyrrhus of Epirus, whose war elephants introduced them to a kind of battlefield shock they had never imagined. Later, Hannibal would slaughter entire Roman armies at Trebia, Lake Trasimene, and Cannae. By any conventional measure, Rome should have broken. It did not. Instead, Rome adapted. Each defeat became a lesson written in blood. The Roman approach to war was not built in theory but refined in crisis. They studied what worked against them, what failed them, and what needed to change. Where others saw disaster, Rome saw data. Over time, this mindset produced something fundamentally different from the Macedonian Phalanx. Not a perfect machine designed for ideal conditions, but a resilient system designed to survive the worst-case scenario. The Roman legionary was equipped not for elegance, but for practicality. His shield, the scutum, was a large, curved rectangle, more door than decoration. It covered much of the body and could absorb tremendous punishment. But it was more than passive protection. The scutum allowed a soldier to shove, to punch, to create space. In tight combat, it functioned like a battering ram strapped to the arm. It turned defense into leverage. A Roman did not merely block an attack, he destabilized the opponent behind it. Then came the pilum. At first glance, it was simply a heavy javelin. In reality, it was a weapon of tactical sabotage. Designed with a soft iron shank, the pilum would bend upon impact. If it struck a shield, it could not easily be removed. The weight dragged the shield down or forced the enemy to discard it altogether. If it struck armor or flesh, it delivered devastating penetration. More importantly, once thrown, it could not be reused against the Romans. In a single volley, a disciplined Roman line could transform an organized enemy front into a disordered mass of men struggling with disabled shields and compromised defenses. And once that disruption occurred, the legionary closed in with his gladius. Unlike the long slashing swords romanticized in popular imagination, the gladius was short, efficient, and brutally effective. It was designed primarily for stabbing. In the crush of battle, where bodies pressed tight and space vanished, wide swings were impractical. A quick thrust to the abdomen, the groin, or beneath the ribs required only inches. The gladius was not a symbol of heroism, it was a tool of controlled lethality. Roman training emphasized restraint and precision. A legionary was taught not to overextend, not to chase glory, but to strike, withdraw, and maintain formation. But equipment alone does not define a system. The true innovation of Rome lay in organization. Unlike the Macedonian Phalanx, which functioned as a single dense block, the Roman legion was divided into smaller units called maniples. These units were arranged in a checkerboard pattern, leaving deliberate gaps between them. To an outside observer, this might have appeared disjointed. In reality, it was a calculated design. The gaps allowed for maneuver, rotation of fresh troops, and adaptation to uneven terrain. Where the phalanx required cohesion above all else, the legion embraced controlled flexibility. The Roman battle line typically deployed in 3 successive lines: the hastati in front, the principes behind them, and the triarii in reserve. If the first line faltered or tired, it could withdraw through the spaces between maniples, allowing the second line to advance. This rotational system preserved endurance. It acknowledged a fundamental truth of combat. Men grow exhausted, plans unravel, and initial assumptions rarely survive contact with the enemy. Embedded within this structure was another critical element: the centurion. Centurions were not aristocrats appointed by birthright. They were career soldiers who had risen through merit, often after decades of service. They led from the front, recognizable by their transverse crests and hardened presence. More importantly, they possessed authority. Within the broader strategy set by higher command, centurions could make decisions in real time. They could exploit opportunities, respond to threats, and adjust tactics without waiting for orders to filter down from afar. This decentralized initiative was a quiet revolution. While the Phalanx depended on maintaining alignment under centralized direction, the Legion functioned more like a network. If one part encountered resistance, another could pivot. If terrain disrupted formation, units could adjust independently. Roman doctrine did not assume perfect conditions. It assumed friction. It anticipated chaos and built around it. Over time, this approach shaped not just Roman tactics but Roman identity. The Legion was an institution grounded in discipline, repetition, and accountability. Training was relentless. Camps were fortified nightly with near-ritual precision. Logistics were calculated with care. Rome did not rely on brilliance in the moment. It relied on preparation over time. For entrepreneurs and leaders, this distinction matters. Rome did not bet on a single breakthrough. It invested in systems capable of compounding advantage. By the mid-2nd century BC, Rome had tested this model against nearly every type of opponent imaginable. Mountain tribes, Hellenistic kingdoms, maritime powers, and Carthaginian generals of extraordinary genius, all had forced adaptation. Each conflict refined the legion's structure. What emerged was not flashy. It did not inspire awe from a distance the way a forest of 18-foot pikes might. But beneath its apparent simplicity was a deeply engineered ecosystem of resilience. At its core, the contrast between Macedonia and Rome was philosophical. The Macedonian Phalanx represented the triumph of unity. It maximized collective strength through rigid alignment. Its power flowed from cohesion and centralized control. When conditions favored it, it dominated with overwhelming force. But it was optimized for a specific environment. The Roman legion represented the triumph of adaptability. It distributed authority, embraced modularity, and prepared for disruption. It did not seek flawless execution, it sought durable performance. Its strength lay in its ability to absorb shock, exploit openings, and recover from setbacks. One system pursued perfection. The other pursued survivability. As Rome expanded eastward, these two philosophies moved toward collision. On paper, the Macedonian Phalanx still carried the prestige of Alexander. It had the longer reach, the imposing presence, the aura of invincibility. But Rome brought something less visible and arguably more dangerous: a culture of iteration. When these forces would eventually meet, the question would not simply be which formation was stronger. It would be which philosophy could endure when the battlefield refused to cooperate. And in that difference, between rigidity and flexibility, between centralized precision and decentralized initiative, the future of the Mediterranean world was already taking shape. When Alexander the Great died in 323 BC, he left behind no clear successor, only an empire stretched from Greece to India and a circle of ambitious generals unwilling to yield power. What followed was not stability, but fragmentation. For nearly half a century, his commanders fought over the remains of his conquests in a series of brutal wars. By the time the dust settled, Alexander's unified empire had fractured into rival kingdoms: Macedon in the north, the Seleucid Empire in Asia, Ptolemaic Egypt in the south. They preserved the language, culture, and military traditions he had spread, but they did not preserve his unity. What remained was prestige without cohesion, inheritance without central direction. Macedon, the homeland of Philip and Alexander, still clung to its identity as the cradle of conquest. The Phalanx remained its backbone. The memory of past glory lingered in court ceremonies and military parades. But the geopolitical landscape had changed. While the successor kingdoms competed and maneuvered across the eastern Mediterranean, a different power was consolidating itself in the west. Rome did not expand in dramatic leaps. It expanded methodically. After surviving the existential threat of Hannibal during the Second Punic War, Rome emerged hardened and more determined than ever. Carthage, its great rival, was reduced to a shadow of its former strength. In Spain, Roman influence deepened. In North Africa, its authority became unquestioned. What had once been a regional republic was now the dominant military force in the Western Mediterranean. And Rome's ambitions did not stop at the Adriatic. As trade routes intertwined and political alliances shifted, tensions between Rome and the Hellenistic kingdoms intensified. Macedonia, under King Perseus, watched this expansion with growing concern. Perseus was not Philip II, nor was he Alexander. He lacked their charisma and strategic brilliance. But he inherited something powerful, the symbolism of their legacy. To rule Macedon was to rule in the shadow of greatness. And Perseus believed that shadow still carried weight. He sought to reassert Macedonian influence across Greece, forging alliances and quietly encouraging resistance to Roman interference. To many Greek states, Rome's presence felt less like partnership and more like supervision. Perseus positioned himself as a counterbalance, a defender of Hellenic autonomy. Beneath the diplomacy, however, lay a calculation. If Macedon could rally enough support and demonstrate military strength, it might halt Rome's eastward momentum. Rome interpreted these moves not as diplomacy, but as provocation. The Senate responded in its characteristic fashion, with deliberation, then force. War was declared. Yet Rome did not dispatch a reckless young firebrand in search of glory. Instead, they turned to experience. Lucius Aemilius Paulus was chosen to command the Roman forces. He was an aristocrat of the old guard, twice consul, disciplined and measured. Unlike some Roman commanders eager for spectacle, Paulus was cautious. He respected Macedon's military tradition. He understood that the Phalanx, if engaged on its own terms, remained formidable. This was not a campaign of impulsive charges. It was a strategic contest. When Roman legions crossed into Greece, both sides maneuvered carefully. Perseus commanded an army of roughly 40,000 men, anchored by the Macedonian Phalanx, the same formation that had once broken Persian lines and unified Greece. He sought open ground, broad plains where his 18-foot pikes could deploy to maximum effect. On flat terrain, the Phalanx was devastating. Its strength lay in frontal dominance. If Perseus could draw the Romans into a direct confrontation on ideal ground, he believed victory would follow. Paulus refused to oblige. Instead of rushing into battle, he positioned his legions in more uneven terrain, forcing Perseus to consider the risks of engagement. For weeks, the two armies shadowed one another across the landscape of northern Greece. Camps were established, dismantled, and re-established. Scouts skirmished. Supply lines were tested. Neither commander wanted to commit prematurely. It resembled a high-stakes chess match. Perseus relied on inherited strength, confidence in the Phalanx's proven capacity to overwhelm. Paulus relied on patience and structure. He drilled his men, reinforced discipline, and waited for conditions that favored flexibility. He knew that Rome's advantage was not spectacle, but adaptability. The legion thrived in complexity. It could pivot, absorb shock, and exploit disruption. But it required the right moment. Tension mounted in both camps. 80,000 men stood within striking distance of one another, aware that a single miscalculation could determine the balance of power in the Mediterranean. For Perseus, victory meant restoring Macedonian prestige and potentially igniting a broader coalition against Rome. For Paulus, victory meant absorbing one of the last great Hellenistic powers into Rome's orbit. The stakes extended far beyond territory. Then, as often happens in history, the decisive confrontation did not begin with a grand strategic flourish. It began with an accident. A minor skirmish near a river escalated unexpectedly. Units from both sides moved to support their comrades. What might have remained a localized clash expanded rapidly. Before either commander could fully restrain events, the armies were committing to engagement. Perseus saw opportunity. His forces were assembling on terrain that, at first glance, favored deployment of the Phalanx. He ordered the advance. The massive formation began to roll forward, ranks aligning, sarissas lowering in unison. It was a familiar sight, intimidating, precise, steeped in history. Paulus responded quickly, ordering his legions into formation. There would be no time for elaborate maneuvering now. The collision was inevitable. Yet even in this moment, the broader strategic dynamics were at play. Perseus trusted the structural superiority of his inherited system. Paulus trusted the accumulated lessons of Roman resilience. One side leaned on legacy, the other leaned on iteration. The first spark at Pydna was almost trivial. Late in the afternoon, as the heat began to soften and long shadows stretched across the plain, a small skirmish broke out near a stream between advance units from both armies. Accounts differ on what triggered it. Some say a runaway horse, others a contested water source. But what matters is this: neither side had planned for a full-scale engagement at that exact moment. And yet, within minutes, reinforcements poured in. Pride, tension, and proximity did the rest. What began as a localized clash escalated into something irreversible. Lucius Aemilius Paulus, watching the disorder ripple outward, understood immediately that events were slipping beyond controlled maneuver. Across the field, King Perseus saw opportunity. The ground ahead, though not perfectly flat, offered enough open space to deploy his greatest asset. Orders were shouted. Drums and horns cut through the rising noise. The Macedonian phalanx began to assemble. To witness the deployment of the phalanx was to watch a machine come alive. Thousands of men moved into alignment, shields locking, ranks dressing their lines with mechanical precision. Then the sarissas, those massive 18-foot pikes, tilted forward in synchronized motion. The front 5 rows leveled their spear points outward, creating a layered wall of steel. From a Roman perspective, it must have looked like a living fortress advancing with deliberate inevitability. And then it moved. The sound alone would have been overwhelming: the rhythmic thud of boots, the creak of wood and leather, the metallic hiss of spearheads shifting into position. Dust rose beneath the formation as it pressed forward. There was no sprint, no chaotic charge. The phalanx advanced at a steady, relentless pace, maintaining cohesion as if guided by a single will. The Roman front lines braced. Roman legionaries were trained for close combat, shield-to-shield fighting, short bursts of violence, adaptability in tight quarters. But the phalanx denied proximity. As the distance collapsed, the first Roman pila were thrown. Some struck shields. Some glanced off bronze helmets. But the sheer depth of the formation absorbed the impact. The sarissas kept coming. When the lines met, the collision was catastrophic. The forward momentum of the phalanx, combined with the reach of its pikes, drove into the Roman maniples with crushing force. The front ranks of legionaries found themselves impaled or forced backward before they could even swing their gladii. The layered spear points created a lethal buffer zone, 5 staggered rows of stabbing steel that punished any attempt to close distance. Roman shields, sturdy as they were, struggled against the concentrated pressure. Men were shoved off their footing. Gaps opened. Cohesion faltered. For a moment, an unmistakable, dangerous moment, the Roman line began to buckle. The Macedonians sensed it. Their training emphasized forward pressure, collective force. Every soldier understood his role: maintain alignment, keep the sarissa steady, push as one. The effect was like a battering ram powered by thousands of bodies. Roman soldiers who had fought Gauls, Carthaginians, and Iberians now confronted something different: a formation that did not waver under individual heroics. The uneven terrain had not yet disrupted the Macedonian advance. In this initial phase, the phalanx operated close to ideal conditions. Its front remained largely intact. Its flanks were protected. Its discipline held. Roman centurions shouted themselves hoarse, trying to stabilize their units. Orders were barked to hold formation, to brace shields, to wait for an opening. But openings were scarce. The sarissas dictated distance. Legionaries who attempted to duck under the spear points were met by the next rank. Those who tried to push through found themselves skewered before they could bring their short swords into play. Dust and sweat mixed with blood. The sun dipped lower, casting a harsh glare across bronze armor. The psychological effect was as powerful as the physical one. For soldiers on the Roman front, it must have felt like facing a moving wall, unyielding, impersonal, unstoppable. Paulus, observing from a vantage point behind the lines, recognized the danger. He had respected the phalanx before the battle. Now he was witnessing its raw power. This was the system that had crushed Greek city-states at Kyrenia. This was the engine that had carried Alexander through Persia. In direct, frontal engagement, it remained devastating. The Roman left began to give ground. Not in full rout, not yet, but enough to signal instability. Units were compressed, their ability to maneuver restricted. The manipular system, designed for flexibility, struggled under the sheer frontal pressure. Where terrain was smoother, the phalanx advanced with brutal efficiency. For Perseus, this was validation. The inherited machine was performing as it always had. The Roman line was bending. Momentum favored Macedon. The first phase of Pydna belonged to the phalanx. From a modern perspective, the scene reads like a case study in competitive advantage. When operating within its optimal conditions, the Macedonian system was extraordinary. It maximized collective strength, minimized individual vulnerability, and imposed its structure onto the battlefield. Against a less adaptable opponent, it would have been decisive. And in these opening moments, Rome appeared dangerously close to being that less adaptable opponent. But battles, like markets, rarely remain static. Conditions shift. Pressure reveals weaknesses as well as strengths. What looked like collapse was, in reality, stress that would test whether Roman flexibility could survive the initial shock. As the phalanx pressed forward and Roman lines strained under its weight, the outcome seemed to tilt toward Macedon. The legend of Alexander's warriors was not fading. It was asserting itself with terrifying clarity. For now, the wall of steel was winning. At first, the Macedonian advance looked unstoppable. The phalanx continued to press forward, its layered spear points driving Roman units back step by step. But battlefields are not parade grounds, and perfection is fragile when reality intrudes. The plain near Pydna was not uniformly flat. What had appeared manageable from a distance began to reveal subtle ridges, shallow ravines, and uneven patches of earth. As the phalanx pushed ahead in tight formation, those minor irregularities became magnified. A dip in the ground forced one section to adjust its stride. A rocky rise disrupted another. The alignment that made the formation lethal required cohesion measured in inches. When the terrain interfered, the machine began to strain. At first, the disruptions were small, barely noticeable gaps between shields, slight misalignments in the forest of Cerissus. But in a formation built on interlocking precision, even a few feet of separation could be dangerous. The front ranks struggled to maintain a unified front as sections advanced at slightly different speeds. The deeper the formation moved across uneven ground, the more those subtle distortions widened. And where there are cracks, opportunity follows. Lucius Aemilius Paulus had been watching carefully. He had seen the initial Roman line buckle under pressure, but he had also seen something else: the phalanx losing its perfect geometry. He understood what that meant. The Macedonian formation was devastating from the front, but its strength depended entirely on maintaining a continuous wall. If that wall fractured, even briefly, the very design that made it powerful would make it vulnerable. Paulus issued an order that required discipline and nerve. Instead of attempting to reform a single solid line against the phalanx, he instructed his legionaries to exploit the openings. Small units were to advance independently into the gaps forming between Macedonian blocks. This was not a mass countercharge. It was controlled infiltration. For a Roman soldier, this was the moment training became instinct. The manipular system had been designed for flexibility. Units could detach, pivot, and maneuver in ways a rigid phalanx could not. Centurions did not wait for distant signals. They made immediate tactical decisions within their sectors. As soon as the openings became visible, Roman officers drove their men forward. The command was simple in principle, terrifying in execution: break the line. Legionaries surged into the spaces where the Cerissus no longer overlapped perfectly. Once inside that lethal buffer zone, the dynamic changed completely. The long pikes that had kept the Romans at bay became unwieldy. In tight quarters, an 18-foot spear is not an advantage, it is a liability. Macedonian soldiers, trained to fight as part of a cohesive wall, suddenly found themselves isolated in fragmented clusters. This was combat at arm's length. Roman scuta, large curved shields, absorbed blows as legionaries closed the distance. The gladius, short and brutally efficient, was designed for thrusting in confined space. Roman doctrine emphasized targeting the abdomen, the groin, the unprotected areas beneath armor. The fighting devolved into brutal, intimate violence. The ordered rhythm of the phalanx dissolved into chaos. Inside the formation, the Macedonians lost what had made them formidable: collective momentum. Men in the rear ranks, still gripping their sarissas, could not effectively assist comrades engaged in close combat. The density that once amplified their power now restricted their movement. Some attempted to drop their long pikes and draw secondary weapons, but they were not trained for this kind of fragmented melee. The psychological shift was immediate. What had felt like a unified advance now felt like encirclement. From above, the transformation would have been stark. The once smooth front of the phalanx fractured into disconnected segments. Roman maniples penetrated deeper, widening the gaps. Each breach multiplied the pressure on adjacent units. The system was unraveling not because it lacked courage, but because it lacked adaptability. Paulus did not need overwhelming strength. He needed leverage. By attacking the seams rather than the surface, he turned the phalanx's rigidity against itself. As Roman units carved into the Macedonian line, panic began to spread. Communication within the phalanx was limited. Commands that worked during orderly advance were nearly impossible to transmit amid collapsing cohesion. Soldiers who had relied on the stability of the formation now found themselves fighting alone or in small clusters, surrounded by enemies who excelled in precisely this environment. The collapse was not instantaneous. It was progressive, like a building failing from its internal supports. One section gave way, then another. As more Romans penetrated the line, the integrity of the entire formation disintegrated. Some Macedonian units attempted to regroup, but the terrain that had disrupted them initially now compounded their retreat. Disorganized movement across uneven ground led to further fragmentation. The Roman legion, by contrast, thrived in broken terrain. Its decentralized structure allowed it to adapt in real time. The emotional peak of the battle arrived not with a single dramatic moment, but with realization. Macedonian soldiers understood that the phalanx, the formation that had defined their identity, was no longer functioning as intended. The myth of invincibility faltered. King Perseus, observing the reversal, faced a decision. He could attempt to rally the remnants and risk encirclement, or he could preserve himself and whatever remained of his army. As Roman pressure intensified and Macedonian casualties mounted, he chose survival. Perseus fled the field. Leadership departure in ancient warfare carried enormous symbolic weight. When the king withdrew, morale shattered. Organized resistance deteriorated rapidly. What had begun as a confident advance ended in rout. Thousands of Macedonian soldiers were cut down as they attempted to escape. Others threw down their weapons. By sunset, the field belonged to Rome. The significance of that turning point extends beyond casualty numbers. At Pydna, strength did not defeat strength. Structure defeated structure. A rigid system optimized for ideal conditions was dismantled by a system designed to adapt under stress. For entrepreneurs, executives, or creators watching this story unfold, the lesson is strikingly modern. The Macedonian phalanx represented operational perfection within a fixed model. The Roman legion represented modular flexibility, empowered units capable of independent action aligned to a broader strategy. When conditions shifted, one system cracked. The other adjusted. The victory at Pydna was not merely tactical. It was conceptual. Rome did not overpower the phalanx head-on. It entered the gaps, attacked the seams, and collapsed the system from within. In that decisive window of minutes, history pivoted. The age of the long spear yielded to the age of the adaptable sword. When the dust settled at Pydna, more than 20,000 Macedonian soldiers lay dead, and with them fell the last real claim to Alexander's military legacy. Macedon would soon be divided, absorbed, and reduced to a client state of Rome. The phalanx did not disappear overnight, but it never again decided the fate of the Mediterranean. An era closed quietly on that field. But this was never just about spears and shields. Pydna revealed something deeper about power itself. The Macedonian system represented perfected execution, disciplined, unified, optimized for ideal conditions. The Roman legion represented adaptive design, modular, resilient, built to respond when reality refused to cooperate. When pressure came and the ground shifted, perfection cracked. Adaptability endured. Rome did not simply win a battle. It proved that flexibility outperforms rigidity, that empowered units outperform centralized control, and that systems built to evolve will outlast systems built to dominate. In many ways, the Legion didn't just defeat the Phalanx, it conquered the future. If you enjoy exploring the strategic lessons hidden inside history's greatest turning points, make sure to subscribe and join this channel. Because sometimes, the most important battles aren't fought with weapons, they're fought with ideas.